Okay, I was saying this is Retts speaking, and this is being recorded for our history. I'm going to introduce now um, the co-facilitator. Margie Adam is a pioneer of women's music. We know that. She was one of the first out lesbian performers. Not only is she a wonderful singer, songwriter, and pianist, but she has a knack for being the right person at the right time, and what I consider a keeper of the flame that was lit many years ago. So please welcome to the Zoom today my friend, the visionary and co-facilitator for today's Zoom, Margie Adam.
Mm, thank you, Retts. Uh, Often, I remember in the past, I used to pause before I said anything just to kind of gather myself all in one place. And this day is no different for me. So before we begin our panel today, I'd like to invite us all into a space of silence to call, to feel, to sense the power and presence and voice of Alex Dobkin. R.I.P. Alex. Rest in power. So before we get started, I want to thank my co-facilitators, Retts, Melanie DeMore, Mev Miller, also Deirdre Knowles, JR, tech support, and Linden I beg your pardon, Winterberger, our ASL interpreter. Talking with Amy earlier, she said, so do you want to talk about our Genesis stories or what? And I thought, oh, what a great way to describe it. Genesis stories. I want to say right away that where I am today is that I haven't actually done this kind of work or climbed into the women's music space in quite a while. And so my heart is pounding like it used to pound when I stood off stage, right at the edge of transforming into something else. I don't know, this conduit. And I came to my closure actually in 2008, last performance on stage. I've been an integrative counselor working one-on-one for 10 years. So let me just say that having 150 women in my office at one time is really something. Fills me up. And in anticipation, I've been filling up on this journey, incredible memory lane. I called it memory lane, but it's really more than a lane. It's more than a 10, highway. It's more than, it's a world. It's a world, this women's music thing. And stepping back into it is really quite expansive and overwhelming as well. I remember two things. 2005 at the Women's March, I was standing on the edge of the stage and turned around and there was Hillary Clinton. And I thought, oh my God, wow, oh wow, oh wow, right before I was supposed to walk out on stage. Then I walked out on stage, sat down on the piano and looked out at, I think there were about 1 million of us there, and then looked back and there was a guy at the end of the piano talking on the telephone. And I thought, oh, so you're not the thing, Marg. You're part of the thing, but you're not the thing. And for me, this whole opportunity to bring our community and OLOC and beyond behind the scenes is such a powerful opportunity to clarify that, in fact, women's music was always this incredible collaboration between women who were on stage, who were held and lifted up and assisted in every way by all the women who stepped forward and said, I want to be a part of this. So for me today, this is about gathering us all together and sharing what it was like to be a part of this incredible onstage, offstage, backstage crew that constitute the production of women's music and culture. So before I go any further, I just want to say that Retts and I got together and began to curate this thing. Like, how do we do this talking about women's music behind the scenes. And the first thing that was clear to me is that it was going to take more than one panel. It was going to take two panels, one panel about production and one panel about distribution. So once we moved the distribution, which has to do with all sorts of things like bookstores and radio and et cetera, and put that into June, then it was like, how do we wrangle this thing called women's music, the production of, and that would be the producers, well, you have the list and the women will be here representing that, all of those into a few voices that will represent all of the women that were involved in this all over the country for quite a long period of time, from in the late 1960s throughout till today. So first of all, we say we have to split it in half and have two panels. The second thing is very clear to me is that I am a soloist. And there are whole things I can't speak to as a soloist. And there are also other particulars about me that mean that I can't speak to a whole other set of experiences. And so I closed my eyes and I said, who's going to help me? Who's going to be my co-facilitator? And the face that popped up and the sound that I heard was Melanie DeMore, a sister, singer-songwriter, but also a member of a group called Cultural Heritage Choir and other groups, and also a conductor of choirs and choruses, including the chorus at Michigan. This is a woman, I just want to say, that can walk into a room anywhere in the world, stand in front of a group of people who do not know her and do not know each other, and in 1 hour, build a chorus of voices who can walk out on stage and sing to thousands and thousands of people a single song. I give you Melanie DeMore. What do you want to say, Mel?
Hey, Tam. Oh, my. I'm so glad to see all of you. And what I know is that without Amy and Connie and Lisa and Laura and Boden and Casey and Linda and Tam and Retts, it don't matter what we do, and we cannot do it without them and many, many others. I mean, we sit up in here singing at our house all by ourselves, but in order for us to be able to do what we do, we need all of you. And, I've helped raise and mentor a lot of young musicians and singers. And I have a rule with them. I say, you go in, first of all, you better be on time for your sound check. You better have your stuff together, and you treat people with respect. The person who is your sound engineer is just as important as anything that you do, and you better act correct, or else I'm gonna come there and I'm gonna kick your ass. So I am really glad to be part of this, and of course, I've had the pleasure of performing with Margie, and many of you have always inspired me, and I am really glad to be here today. Let's do this thing, Marg.
Yeah. All righty then. It's really, really significant that this whole thing is being recorded. And I want to use this as an opportunity to name names. I want to invite all the panelists to name other women who have also worked backstage with you over the years, so that those names get captured by this recording for all time, for the women and our allies who are going to come after us and want to know what's the full extent of what women's music was, not just the artists, many of whom get named and more are being named over time. Not only the artists, but all the women who built the infrastructure, which is women's music and culture as we know it and as we're growing it. So, and I also want to at this time invite all the women in this community that we're creating right now to use the chat room to name names as well, because I'm very aware that there are women here who represent early women's production companies that had a cast that also were involved in bringing the music to your communities, your cities and towns. So please write down in the chat box the names of women that you worked with, sound, light, stage, everything, artist representation, all of that, so that these names can be caught for all time here in this space with OLOC. It's one of the really powerful and empowering parts of OLOC, that you are committed in the way that we are to gathering, capturing, and holding for all time the history and the herstory of lesbian feminist action, lesbian feminists. I want to also just take this opportunity to name a few names myself. I want to name Boo Price, who is a brilliant producer, was my manager, was my record producer, partner for many, many years. I want to mention Jennifer James, who is a wonderful stage manager, Margot McFedries, lighting designer, Lenny Schwendinger. I'm sorry, Margot was a sound, Lenny Schwendinger is a lighting designer, and two other names. One, Jennifer Abbott, who had one of the most profound impacts on my life of anyone ever. She walked up to me at the first National Women's Music Festival at the very end of the festival as I was putting my suitcase into the car and said, "So what about women's music?" And I looked at her and I said, "Women's music?" And she said, "What about women's music?" And it was as if my brain, mind, body, spirit was ripped open. And that phrase came into my life and has lived at the center of my soul forever. Thank you, Jennifer Abbott, who I believe is here today, and also founded the New Haven Women's Liberation Rock Band in 1970 and put out an LP with her sister, Susan Abbott, and the Chicago Women's Liberation Rock Band. And second, I want to say that today I got a letter in the mail, an email from the Veteran Feminists of America saying that Barbara Love had just published her first memoir called There at the Dawning, Lesbian Feminist Activist, Troublemaker, Champion, Risk Taker. And this is a woman who, with Sydney Abbott, wrote a book called Sappho Was a Right-On Woman, which this young lesbian read and had her head, heart, and soul fused in lesbian love, clarity, and passion. Barbara has a new book out, and I just want to let everyone know that it's true and it's available right now. This panel that we're moving into is a panel most of the women have said to me one time or another, "Why do you want me to go? Why do I have to be in public? You know, I'm backstage, right, Marg? That's where I want to stay." So I want to say in particular how much it means to me that you all said yes and came on here, even though you're not, most of you, upfront gals, that you came on here. You, for me, represent hundreds and hundreds of women who have done work and built and sustained the infrastructure of the women's music network, industry, and movement. So I want to move right into the first panelist. I want to introduce my friend, Amy Horowitz. The last time I was involved very up close and personal with women's music was at the 40th National Women's Music Festival. And I was asked to do the keynote there, and I spoke on radical feminist leadership. And I hadn't spoken public since 2008, so I was very overwhelmed by the end of that. Really undone, tranced out, and off the ground. And Amy came up to me and said, "I really liked what you had to say today. I really appreciated it." And I thought, I think she also said, maybe we could have coffee or something like that. And I had no idea what I had said. And so I said, "Oh yeah, let's have coffee right now." And we talked about radical feminist leadership and many, many other things for the next 2 hours. And she helped me to ground myself and come back to my mind, body, and spirit. And I just want to introduce my friend, colleague, passionate supporter in every way of your work, Amy. So appreciate you. Amy Horowitz.
Thank you so much, Margie. And hi, it's just almost tears in my eyes to be with everybody. I want to say that I'm going to do something that I don't usually do, which is talk about myself and my really early beginnings. So I'm a little bit nervous. And so I actually wrote this down because thinking of 50 years and trying to fit it into 5 minutes was a big task. And I don't want to go over my 5 minutes. But I'd like to start with just one short prayer for Alex Stopkin in Hebrew. Zichronah livracha. May her memory be for a blessing. May her memory be for a blessing. I speak to you from Manahawk lands, the original and current caretakers of the land that I stand on. Bernice Johnson Regan once said, and I quote, "If you feel something is missing, it's probably the sound of your own voice," end quote. Our gathering today is one of giving voice to the voice we have given over decades, now grown into history. For history is always growing forward if we give it voice. Regan also challenged us, quote, "You've got to leave a trail so that others might find you." And so in this spirit, I offer you a few of my Genesis stories with and within what I call the women's music movement. Genesis 1. In the beginning, there was a 19-year-old anti-Vietnam War high school graduate who hitchhiked across the country from Washington, D.C. to Oregon with a tattered copy of Carl Whiteman's, quote, "Refugees from America, a Gay Manifesto" in her Kelty backpack. I settled in Ashland, Oregon, where my first arts organizing act was the 1972 Women's Space in conjunction with the Ashland Women's Health Clinic, co-founded with a group of women who I still love to this day. The next year, a 3-week, all expenses paid work trip to Israel, Palestine turned into a 6-month detour and my unintentional witnessing of and being changed by the 1973 war. I arrived back in Ashland just in time for the Women's Space 1974. I guess by then word was getting out that something was going on in Ashland. And so both Chris Williamson and Holly Neer added this convenient midway stop between Eugene and San Francisco to their tour itineraries. That's how I started producing concerts and carting around Olivia LPs to the few record stores in Ashland and Medford. I guess I was a distributor. Holly Neer pulled up right after her concert and offered me a job as her booking person. She was looking for a lesbian activist who had experience working on the left. And so I drove my yellow Econoline truck down Interstate 5 to Los Angeles. I begin with this Genesis story to introduce my early self, and more importantly, to underscore the local. This is one of so many stories of lesbian arts activism that was going on across North America in the early 1970s. And this is only a narrow swath, largely white women, not nearly the entire story, whose trails we must document and whose voices are also our legacy. Genesis 2. In the beginning, there was a 23-year-old college graduate who entered the Los Angeles hub of women's music in the mid-1970s as Holly Neer's booking agent. There were coalition concerts that brought together Holly's anti-war audiences with her new and renewed lesbian audiences, and women-only shows featuring Holly and Meg Christian. And there was Ginny Burson, an Olivia co-founder who had also been a Furies co-founder. And she invited the new kid on the block to the karate class with Meg, Teresa, Jennifer, Emily, Judy, and I can't even remember who else. One day, Holly showed me a file drawer filled with letters from producers inviting her to perform, and a second file drawer filled with the women artists who were seeking advice on booking. These brimming file drawers gave rise to an idea to establish a way to pass on these invites to other women artists. On a wooden shelf nearby, Holly had meticulously organized the LPs the artists had sent. One cover caught my attention. And when I put the vinyl on the turntable,
Was that Linda?
yes,
No,
you'll see. When I put the vinyl on the turntable, I stopped in my tracks. I had heard that voice before. It was Bernice Regan from the SNCC Freedom Singers. I had heard them sing as a child at the 1963 March on Washington. This was the solo LP, Bernice Regan, Songs of the South on Folkways. And her letter to Holly indicated that she lived in Washington, D.C. That April, when I went home for Passover, I met Bernice for the first time. found out about Sweet Honey in the Rock, and with Holly's help, booked their first tour. Genesis 3. In the beginning, organizing that tour marks the start of my work with Bernice and Sweet Honey in the Rock. Roadwork was born out of this work as a multiracial coalition devoted to putting women artists on the road. Bernice and I, along with Conda Mason and Evelyn Harris, incorporated the organization as a nonprofit in 1978. In the beginning, we decided on the term artist representative. All the other terms were so male and power-laden, like manager, agent. We were neither. The power was Sweet Honey in the Rock and the other artists, and we represented them. Over the course of decades, Roadwork's multiracial coalition served as artist representative for over 30 women artist groups. Genesis 4. In the beginning, Roadwork celebrated its 40th anniversary in 2018 with a 2-day Sister Fire Festival embedded in the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, curated by Toshi Regan, a former 15-year-old Roadwork intern who performed at the age of 19 on the Sister Fire stage with Elizabeth Cotton. A multi-generational mix of 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and 70 somethings comprise the current Roadwork team. And I end with this quote: "The older I get, the better I know that the secret of my going on is when the reins are in the hands of the young who dare to run against the storm." Al Baker through Bernice Johnson Regan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's go, Mel. Move
Amy,
us.
you're a badass mamma jamma. Thank you so much. Well, I have the pleasure of introducing Connie Lane. And first of all, as a performer, when I've had the opportunity to be on the same stage that she is leading us on, I always feel really calm and confident because Connie always leads with her heart, and she's a professional person who leads with her heart. And whenever I see her, I'm like, hey, I'm ready to sing because I'm in good hands. Take it away, Con.
Hey, Mel, thank you so much for that introduction. And yeah, I do lead with my heart because I'm here today because of what I learned in my heart from all of you and a few folks who came decades before us. I'm very clearly here today, honored and humbled to be in this room. Yes, I used to wear black and be in the background and be invisible and do those things because it wasn't about me, right? It's never been about me. I'm saying a few things that a couple of my colleagues here have said today in repeat because we share a lot of the same thinking, right? This is what we learned and taught each other, either by mistake or this is who we want to follow, right? So thank you. I am deeply honored, but I really want to know, how did I become an old lesbian? How did I get this invite? Wait a minute, aren't I just 21? Wasn't it just 1979 when Barbara Lau from St. Louis and I met at a music festival in the middle of Forest Park randomly, and we started meeting. She goes, "Hey, I'm going to this festival in Michigan. You want to come with me?" And in 1979, I went to my first Michigan Women's Music Festival. And wow, who was it? Mark, was it you who said we were all looking for some place to belong? You know, and I didn't know that I was looking for a place to belong. I thought I was on a career path as a professional young stage manager. I was still had 1 year of undergrad to go. I was at Beloit College in Wisconsin, and I had 1 more year. And so I had to go back for my senior year after my first fest, Miss Fest. And I remember getting back there, and it's like I was a young hot shit stage manager, and I'm going to make it in the theater world, and you know, I'm going to go places, but what I really want to do is listen to my heart. So I wrote a letter to Barbara Price and Lisa Vogel, because their names were on the back of a program from that first 79 Michigan Women's Music Festival. And I sent them my resume and said, in the summer of 1980, I'm going to be a graduate. And I love lighting. In fact, I love lighting so much. I don't know who the headliners were, never heard that music. It spoke to me because of the absolute beautiful artistry of Lenny Schwendinger's lighting design. It was Lenny's design that visually captured me with this music that was cracking open my young baby dyke energy that realized I actually had a heart and I wanted to be a piece of that. So I offered, I said, I don't know how you're going to, how you hire crew and whatever, but I love lights. Can I get on the lighting crew? Do you need help? Blah, blah, blah. I still have the letter that Boo Price sent me to invite me to be on the lighting crew at the 1980 Michigan Women's Music Festival. And I went, and that's where I got to work with Lenny. I got to work with Kim LaFone. I was a doer. I wasn't necessarily the thinker and the doer. I was the shower, roll up my sleeves, let's get her done. I learned at Michigan that I could be feral, that I could work all night and still help produce the artistry, right? Yeah, you'd laugh, Retts, feral, but you were feral with an outfit on, you know? I just wore black and was in the background, right? But I was a trust monkey. I loved climbing up. I loved doing the things with no men around. I'd never been in that place before. We had everything we needed. And if we didn't, we figured out how to get it. Or like in theater, which is what my professional background, we made it up. We took resources and turned them into something else. And it was beautiful and magical and it didn't work. And it fit our budget. So there I was in the lighting world. And every year I showed up a little bit early. Before the camper come early and stay late, I'd just show up a couple days early and stay a couple days later because I got the big picture. Thank you, LV. Thank you, everybody at Fest that allowed this night crew stage person to just stick around and help because I was willing to do anything it took on the big picture. And what I learned is that Lisa Mamina and I can throw a Frisbee across the night stage bowl and rock out and dance to music because we weren't working. If we didn't have a show call, we got to play. And at early 20s, yeah, we partied. Yeah, we played hard, but we worked friggin' hard too, right? Parallel times. Oh, shoot, I forgot to start my stopwatch. Will somebody please tell me when I have a minute left? And Amy, I love you. Why didn't I write my 5-minute thing out? Somebody stop this stage manager before she goes on too long. Bottom line is, here's the bottom line, gang. It took me a while to become that stage manager. Thank you, Retts, I got it. But it was through my work with Barbara Lau. I came back to St. Louis after my first professional stage management gig at the New American Theater in Rockford, Illinois. And we started Wired Women Productions, right? And that's where I got to meet many of the artists. That's where I got to start to build relationships with the artists, right? The first concert we produced was Kate Clinton, because one mic, easy peasy, we can handle one mic. Yeah. Who was the second one? The ones that we were the two artists that we were moved both by in the early 80s from Mishfest, we produced Castleberry Dupre. And when they came to St. Louis and we presented them to the St. Louis community, guess what they did? Those were in the days where they actually stayed in people's houses and we had a whole volunteer community to take care of our folks. And tech writers were really small, right? Because the women just wanted to show up and perform and build community. Well, they took me to my first Shirley Caesar concert at Kiel Auditorium. All of a sudden, my world of music was opening up to me. And I realized it was the music all the way along that came in and grabbed my heart that says, this is where I want to be. I don't want to sing. What I want to do is do my piece, right? Of what I have learned about stage management is just what Melanie said. Just show up. We build relationships. Show up on time, y'all. Hey, Vogel, how many times did I ask you? Is there any reason why this show can't start on time? Didn't you put me in? Didn't you put me in that position? so that I ran the show on time. Right? It wasn't union rules at Mishfest or it was at the National Women's Music Festival. We were in the Union Hall. But boy, did we turn that male stage crew in the early 80s when Barbara and I were there as production manager and stage manager. I learned how to stage manage music from Terry Updegrove. There's a name for you all.
Yeah,
Terry
all right.
Updegrove, stage manager extraordinaire. She was in the Bainbridge Island area. She taught me at National when I was still a young 20-year-old punk thinking I knew more than I should know, right? That, Connie, your job is to manage the
Connie.
stage.
All
Yep,
right,
time.
Connie.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much. I
Thank
love
you.
this. All I want to say
Yeah, all
is,
right,
I
Connie.
remember how you made me feel.
Woo.
I don't remember what I did. I don't remember how I did it, but thank you, Maya Angelou, for the input. I remember how you made me feel. And the fact is, I'm still here and I still
Right.
belong.
That's
Love
right.
you all.
Love you, Connie. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Connie.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. Wow. It's just always so good. And as another person who understands the concept of being dapper, you're representing there, Connie. You're looking great. Yeah. I just want to throw in a name of somebody I would like to hold up, and that would be Lynn Haley, who was a great producer here in Oakland and the Bay Area.
Oh, yeah.
Did some incredible work along with Lisbeth Tellefson, another sister who is also, she runs the, she's an archivist for Black lesbians and all that kind of stuff. Incredible. Anyway, here's the part that I love, and I'm so glad to get to introduce Casey, because as a Black artist out there on the world, you have to know how to light us. And Casey knew how to light a sister. And I really appreciate that. And Casey is very steady and very centered. And so she knows how to focus, which makes her really at doing lights. Take it away, Casey.
Oh, that was great. Thanks, Mel.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I just want to start out letting you know they gave us a couple of cues of ideas, but my very first women's music concert was at the 10th anniversary of Olivia at Carnegie Hall.
Yeah.
I was young dyke, probably maybe late teens, early 20s, and I lived on Long Island, and I would go to concerts in the city. So I was like, well, I heard of Chris Williamson. I don't know. I didn't know it was an anniversary concert, but I knew there was a concert there, and I went downtown. I knew it was sold out. I said, well, I'll go downtown. I'll buy a ticket, and if not, I'll just come home or whatever. Well, I got a ticket in the 7th row. It was a 10th anniversary, and I sat right in front of the sign language interpreter, which was, I believe, Susan Frolin. And I was just, it was my first women's music concert, and I was just like eyes wide open and just like, this is awesome. Everybody was dressed up, and it was just, it's wonderful to be there. Just a little history of me, as I was I was an art major in high school and college, and I played guitar, I played piano, I played guitar. A really close friend of mine and I would go to see concerts together because we love live music. We would go see everything. We'd go see everything at the Nassau Coliseum, and we sometimes would go in the city and see concerts. It was one of my best friends and probably the first girl I ever fell in love with. But we just loved going to see concerts. So my mom had the radio on all the time, just always listening to swing music. When she was a kid, she used to cut out of school and go see swing concerts at the Paramount in Manhattan. They had 12 new concerts. They would play swing, a comedian, dancing, and she would cut out of school and do it. So it's kind of in my blood. They would have everybody like Frank Sinatra and Benny Goodman and Tommy Dorsey. She would go see everything. I think Retts' mom did the same thing. But your Retts' mom did the same thing. So when I was in college, I studied, I was an art major. So when I was in school, of course, I love theater. I love music. When I was in school, I thought, it was like, well, I was doing art and I thought, God, let's do some scenery, because that's like big painting. So I got into that and I started doing it. I'm like, oh my God, everything's heavy, everything's loud. So then I started doing some lighting, and lighting was like painting with lights. It was so colorful and everything. And I studied some theater, and there was a concert committee at the school I went to. So I designed lights for the concert committee, and I love that, doing concerts. And when I got out of school, I got a job with a lighting and staging company, but I also got a job at a music hall that I worked at as a lighting designer for 12 years. And we did everything from jazz to blues to folk, reggae, people on their way up, people on their way down. So I love doing, lights for music. And a friend of mine talked to me about Michigan from college, and I went and I was hooked. I love live music. I love women. It was perfect for me. And I was on the crew, and I felt like I was just so overwhelmed. I felt like I was tripping on acid the whole time. It was just like all this sensory input. It was just the music, the women, the art. There was craft shows. It was just people and puppets and parades. It was just incredible. It was like the first time you ever walked into a lesbian bar times 1,000.
Yep.
It was just artistry. It was just amazing. I was just so honored to be a part of that over the years. Let's see. And the thing too, I was working mostly with men. And so working at the Women's Music Festival was just incredible, because women did everything on the production crew. The whole crew was women. The whole plumbers, there was plumbers and childcare workers. It was just everything. And running the shows, it was like we were winging it. So when I started running the shows, it's more like jazz or sitting on a band and jamming with people. And that was, that's really a fun thing to do, just when you get it right and when you're in tune with the band and you're playing with everybody, and I'm doing the lights along and it looks good. I wanted to mention a couple of people. I couldn't have done it without the crews that were on the cruise. I'll mention the last women who were on my crew at Michigan, and I know I'd leave a ton of people out, so I'd just do that. Was Carla, Ayanas, Paula, Emmerich, Ruth, Nardia, Tree, Priest, Lisa Scheibel, and I had to mention Amy Laura. I'm kind of the second wave. I feel like there's so many women that came before me and really started getting this going. And I feel like the second wave coming in about 10 years later or so. But a lot of the festivals that I did go to, I went to because I would do 5 or 10 a year, but most of them I did because I was following Retts around the country. She would be like, hey, let's do lights at this festival. Okay. So yeah, I would do a whole bunch. West Coast, Southern, National, Rhythm Fest, Camp Fest, Her Productions, just so many wonderful, fabulous women. And I have to say the greatest part of it is I have so many friends from those festivals, and they're some of my dearest friends to this day. And, I just feel so honored to work with them and still have them in my life. Yeah.
Yeah. Casey.
Thanks, Casey.
Yeah. Wow. I listen to you women share, and I think, I would arrive backstage, a couple of hours before the concert, and I would walk into this space, and what we did with each other was to trust each other. I walked in and I gave my music to you. I put it in your hands. I put myself, You know, I risked with you. There was something that we were doing that felt like a collective risk and trust, a collaboration that we did. And I never went out to lunch. I never even got to have coffee with almost any of you. And yet there was such a sense of connection and commitment, shared commitment. I think particularly, I mean, it's just a particular relationship. At the end of my 9-foot grand piano stood a woman, the ASL interpreter. I had sent my music to her. She had my lyrics. Maybe we had a conversation that we got to have, you know, what did you mean by this word? Or, you know, is this what you meant? And then the show would begin and I would walk out on the stage and she would already be there and she would turn to me and I would look through this lid and see her and we would have this mind meld, and now we are one. Now we are the voice of this music and I am singing it and you are interpreting it. One of the gifts of this panel for me has been the opportunity to call each one of the panelists and have a conversation so that I could make contact in a way that I never got to do when I was performing. And having a conversation with Laura Kolb, all the things that we talked about in the hour that we communicated with each other were so interesting to me and also enlightening and also educational. And one of the things that she shared with me, which just is that as with this happened over and over in our conversations that I had with other members of the panel as well, the information that I just had no way of knowing had I not had this conversation with her. ASL language, evidently, from what I understand, ostensibly, apparently comes from a Frenchman. But in fact, sign language comes from indigenous people. And from what I understand, a Frenchman and some other guys came through indigenous people's communities and carried off something. But where it was sourced and where it began was it within the indigenous people's communities. How could I have known? How so many things I could not have known had I not been in this community, this infrastructure of women's music, the network, the industry, and the movement. Laura, I'm so happy you're here with us. Please share with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Now you got me all thinking about ASL in English, and I got to shift because, you know, I can go off on that.
That was fabulous.
I was lucky to be to live in Columbus, Ohio, which had a very strong women's community and had women's concerts constantly. And I kind of took it as the norm, but that's how I got started. And then going to festivals. My interest was I wanted to make revolution, and this seemed like a good place to start. Speaking truth to power, but as I went along, I understood that it's also knowing when the power is us. And I felt that working as an interpreter was breaking down barriers, I hoped. And I hoped that standing on the stage, that I would become a symbol of how we're working to break down barriers. And the working, it just never ceases to amaze me how much work it is, these barriers, as they keep coming up. And recently I experienced one where you kind of think, oh gosh, we can just go on, but then this barrier, it's like, no, we got to resolve this too. We built this community, it seemed, because we wanted to see a worldview. We wanted to see a world that centered on us, where we were on stage. and what that would mean. And at this point, I've watched as we struggled to see who can be on stage, who is part of our worldview. Are there barriers to who can be on stage? Our stage is accessible. Can we have deaf women on stage? Y'all used to me. Can we have deaf women on stage? And trying to figure that out, making the stages physically accessible with ramps so other women can go up there. We have a lot of barriers, and I hope that my work helped the community to push a bit on those. One of the things that I tried to do, my first degree is in art. And so I saw myself as being visual, and I would receive these materials. I'd receive little cassette tapes, y'all remember.
Yeah.
And I would listen, and then I would think, how can this become visual? If this artist were deaf, what would they be doing? How would they be putting out their music, their art, their message? And now that's shifting a little bit. I'm working on the videos for the National Music Festival, and oh wow, now it's a different day. Now it's very visual, and I don't get to talk to anyone beforehand. But it's also, for a couple years, I've been trying to integrate the deaf audience, but also saying, like, when when a piece comes out without any words, I have nothing to translate or work with. You know, what do I say? Hey, it's time. Nothing's going to happen for the next 2 minutes. Why don't you go get a sandwich? I can't really do that. So I'm trying to figure out how to present something artful during the time that there's nothing that I can interpret. And I used to step off stage to give all the attention to the performer, because I figure, okay, I'm not doing anything. Hey, and you can look at them. Hey, that's nice to look at. And recently I realized that's just turning the deaf audience off. I mean, turning them off. So I'm trying to work differently with that. So learning and moving in revolution, and in revolution with my own sexuality. I think the community gave me a lot there. Exploring my sexuality, and many of you know, for me, that's the butch femme aspect. So I guess in ending, I'll give a shout out to the queer femmes, and that's all.
Thank you, Laura. I want to just go into one little piece of what you said.
Sure. Oh, sure.
And that is how you are integrating painting, drawing into your interpreting in a way that you said works on the right brain and helps deaf people and hard of hearing people to integrate what it is that the communication is. Is that what you're bringing to National this year? Some kind of visual aspect?
Well, funny, Margie, that you pull that out. Like, you know, I have these silences, and I'm like, oh my God, what can I do? Well, I can't paint. So I'm trying that. Yeah, I'm trying to speak to the right hemisphere. We'll see. We'll see. But hey, in our community, say what the fuck, let's try this.
That's exactly right. That's great. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Laura. Such an interesting conversation we had. Let's see, where are we? Yeah, Mel. You know who's next. Or is it? Wait, am I right? No, sorry, my turn. Many of us in this panel do many things and have done many things. And this next panelist, boy, concert producer. She produced the Pacific Northwest Women's Music Jamboree for Extra Groove. And probably most significant is she built an incredible career and I don't know what to call it, extravaganza of booking artists in women's music. I believe hundreds and hundreds of artists moved through Tam Martin's circle and were moved out into the world. This woman had the capacity to make irresistible any artist that she represented, to clarify specific details of qualities of our work that would make us of particular interest to someone who wanted to produce someone in women's music. And in addition to that, not only was she very convincing, but she had a way of spinning into a space with a poodle skirt and Mary Jane shoes that was just gobsmacking. I want to introduce the high femme of women's music, Tam Martin.
That would be me. Hello. Hey, so I recently retired after 35 years of booking lesbian performers. And when Margie first asked me to be on this panel, I said, I'm not sure what to say. I booked for 35 years. And she said, well, maybe talk about the first time you heard women's music, or you saw women's music, or how you got into the profession, and if so, if that ever transpired into anything else. And now that you've retired, maybe what do you feel like you got out of it? So mine's going to sound a whole lot more about me than anyone else's. Everyone's so inspirational and universal and moving, and mine is really just my story. And it starts with first time I ever heard women's music was I was 17. I was a CIT at a Girl Scout camp. All the out of the staff room, they were always blasting Changer and Songwriter, and I Know You Know, and as we got 2 hours off a day, and all the other CITs would go swimming, and I'd go sit on the porch of the staff room because I wasn't allowed in yet, and just listen to the music because I couldn't not. I just had to listen to the music. So I learned all the songs, and after meals, we'd have to teach songs to the campers, and I always taught Song of the Soul or the Unicorn Song. Those were my kind of trademarks because of that. And at the end of the summer, the CIT director gave all the other CITs these braided bracelets, and she gave me a copy of Changer. So, and so that was that. First time I ever saw women's music, Meg came to my college, Cal State Long Beach, and performed. And I remember being so thrilled hearing Ode to a Gym Teacher and Leaping Lesbians out loud. I mean, I what can you do except for just explode? And so in 1983, right out of college, I got hired at Olivia. It was just like 6 weeks after Chris and Meg had done Carnegie, which I had been at as a viewer. And this is the beginning of 83. And I got actually hired as Judy's assistant. After I worked there for just a couple of months, the in-house booking agent left. And so I was going to fill in until they could find someone. And I found I had a knack for it, and I loved it. So I, kept doing that. In addition to my other Olivia things, I kept booking. And let me just tell you, if you're going to start off as a new agent, you might as well have your roster be Meg Christian and Chris Williamson and Teresa Trull and Barbara Higbee and Deirdre McCallum, because that's who I started with And that was a good start to build relationships. And so I did that, and I did that for 5 years. I worked at Olivia for 5 years, and then I decided to move back to Long Beach, Southern California, and start my own booking agencies. I called it Beachfront Bookings and Productions. I kept my roster and booking, and I started producing events in Southern California. I booked shows, or I should say produced shows in Long Beach and Los Angeles and San Diego. I did about, I don't know, 25 or 30 shows down here. And then I decided to, after 5 years down here, move up to Portland, Oregon, because my partner lived up there, and I wanted to, move up there and produce shows in Portland and Eugene. But at that time, I decided to expand my roster besides just Olivia artists. So I added Holly and Margie and Farron and, just a few unknowns. I also expanded to comedy. And so I started booking Kate Clinton and Suzanne Westenhofer, Judy Gold, Karen Williams, Mark Gomez. You get the idea. And so I did that, and so I basically just did that for another 25 years, and then I decided it was time for me to do something else. So that's my story. The thing that Margie wanted me to share, because is that I did, also produced that little festival, but I did workshops at it. I did 2 workshops always. One was called Negotiating a Fair Performance Contract, and one was called How to Bring Women's Music and Cultural Events to Your Community. And I actually did those workshops at National several times and at Michigan a couple of times. But that seemed to be one that really resonated with people. I would kind of do an overview. And then at the end of my workshop, I would pass out my cards and promise any woman who took one that if she called me, I would absolutely, with no pressure, walk her step by step by step on how, we get a venue, we find sound and lights, we find, all these different things. And out of that, not only did I get several shows that way, but several of those people went on to produce other things. So that's been kind of rewarding. I know at least a dozen people who have produced other performers besides the ones that they did with me, just by me basically teaching them on the phone, just the step by step. So that was kind of an important thing I did. And then to wind up, the things I got the best out of doing this for 35 years, I would say, besides working with people like Lisa and who's I'm looking at right now, and all of you, and just everybody, was that I felt like I got to be a part of a network that put something out there that made a difference. I feel like I was part of that, which is so cool. And besides just putting out the entertainment, but if you recall, and I know we all do, just gathering women in an audience in one room, the energy, the excitement, the sisterhood, the how meaningful it was, just getting in my case, when I started off, I would get 1,000 women at a show, all in one room. That was very rewarding. And also, I guess my last thing would be, I got to wake up for 35 years, every single day, loving my job, and knowing that my heart and my politics were in line with each other. And I will forever be grateful for that. So that's my story.
Thank you, Tam. Thank you so much. Just curious, how many people did you end up booking?
Altogether?
Yeah.
If you want me to guess,
Yeah.
40,
40.
probably. Tours for 40. I mean, as
Yeah.
far as full-time, you know, for, like,
Yeah.
I booked Chris for 22 years and you know how
Yeah.
that goes, Holly for 12 and da-da-da.
Yeah.
But if you're
yeah.
talking about, like, I would do
In
like
general,
a tour,
yeah.
like, you know, like, besides booking you and your normal, and you just like your tours, I
Yeah.
did like that special thing for you and Barbara and the story project for
Yeah.
a lot of people. Yeah.
Thank you, Tam,
Yeah,
on
well,
behalf
come on.
of all the audiences. Yeah,
all
and
the
all
oth-
the
and all the
artists. Thank
artists.
you, Tam. Yeah. All right. Are you there, Scoot?
I'm
Where are
here,
you?
and I wanted to just put a shout out to another road manager, booking agent. That would be Donna Coronas.
Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes.
yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
Donna was the first person, well, one of the persons for the Linda Tillery and the Cultural Heritage Choir.
Yep.
So she was really there.
A
with
force,
Of
force.
course, absolutely, absolutely. So now I get the pleasure of introducing a woman who, because of her dedication and her work, ongoing work, that gave us as artists a place to be our true selves, to bring to the world this beautiful National Women's Music Fest. I mean, Linda is I mean, just a moment. I'm just from my heart to yours. I got to tell you, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I remember when I first came to National. I mean, I was a pup, and I did a showcase thing there, and it was just such a loving environment, you know. And I thought, what is this? I'm going, and I got to say, how many of us, particularly in these last in throughout all of our lives, we'd go to get the sustenance at National, to be with our family, and that Linda created this incredible space of connection and love and appreciation. And I just always felt so glad when I got there to take a big deep breath. So please, thank you so much, Linda. Here you go. I mean, come on, people. Can we see some hands or something?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. Linda
up
Wilson.
and down in our little squares.
Linda Wilson.
Go, baby.
Thank you, Melanie. Of course, I didn't start National, and there's a lot of women before me, and I
I know
started
that,
working.
baby, but I think about you.
Thank you. And I produced you in Kansas City. So I feel like an imposter. I was telling Margie the other day, I feel like an imposter in this panel with all these other professional women. I feel like I just showed up and did whatever was asked of me. So that's how I approach this. I was married to a man. I don't know how many other people here were married to men before they started off into the real life. But when I got divorced, a man next to me was in a theater group, and he saw how depressed I was, and he asked me to join his theater group. And I went to work with him, and I found out that my place was not on the stage, but behind the stage. So I started doing the production work and stuff behind the stage. And that's where I met two women in a group called Rosie's Bar and Grill. And I started helping them set up their sound equipment and stuff. And then one day, one show, they said, well, why don't you run the sound for us, Linda? And I had no experience, and they just trusted me to do their sound. And that was my first sound engineering job. And then in Kansas City, they started a community radio show, and I started producing women's music with Willow Productions, and KKFI community radio in Kansas City was looking for women to do shows because they they wanted a certain percentage of women and people of color to be on their show because there's a community radio station. So they asked me to do a women's music show, and I did that for 32 years. And I stopped doing it last September to move to Florida and retire. And I can't tell you how much I missed that, just getting new music and listening to it and talking to women on the radio about their music and why they do it and how they sustain themselves doing something that's, financially not very rewarding, but emotionally and, you know, is very rewarding to be in that woman's space. I also was part owner of the Phoenix bookstore in Kansas City, which also sold women's music, and we had coffee houses there. So I organized all of those. And anyway, I've been doing women's music concerts for 35 years in Kansas City, and I worked with Tam quite often. She was always calling me saying, you got to book this person. They're just wonderful. And she was always right. And I had many great shows from the artists at Tamsin. I really appreciate that. My first Women's Music Festival was the Southern Women's Music and Comedy Festival in Georgia. And I just went to the festival and I showed up to the stage and asked if they had anything for me to do. And they asked me to set clear-com for Boden. And that's my first job at Women's Music Festivals. Clear-com. It's a good job to have, actually. Get to listen to all the music. And then I went to Rhythm Fest where I think that's where I met, at Southern, I think that's where I met Retts. And kind of like Casey, I followed Retts around at all the women's music festivals. So she got me a job at Rhythm Festival, where I also worked clear-com on the night stage, and I got it's really nice. I was on the monitors clear-com at that time, so I was on the stage and I got to see all the performers from the side and up close, and it was really a new perspective, and it was just wonderful to work with all these women and just the spirit, you know, having that being involved in the middle of that, all the women energy and how they work together differently than men do. It was the highlight of my life every year when I went to the festivals. I think that's where I met most of the women that are on this panel, like Casey and I can't remember who else is here, but I worked with almost everybody because except for Connie and Amy, and I have to say that they were always very generous and teaching other women, and I've learned many things from Casey and Retts and Lisa and other women that I work with, and so I just want to say it's really different working in a women's community, because I worked for Social Security in a very male environment, and it was such a pleasure to be away from that. So Retts invited me to work at the day stage at National in 1996. I was just a gopher, showed up and did odd jobs and stuff. And one of my jobs was to hem Greta Kammermeyer's pants before she went on stage. And I used duct tape to put a hem in her pants before she went out and gave a speech. And, that was my very first festival, National. So I continued to work at National. I started working on the day stage as a crew, and then I became the day stage manager with Kelly Conway when it moved to Muncie, Indiana. And Kelly, I really loved Kelly. She was a great teacher. Her passion for music is amazing, and that's where I also met Chris Koth. I want to give a big shout out to Chris because I worked with her at Michigan. I worked with her at National. I worked with her at many other festivals, and she always took the time to come and talk to me after the show, to talk to me about how to make certain decisions and how things went and how I could do things better and what I did. She also told me what I did good, and she was so sincere, and she really took the time to talk to me, and I really appreciate it. I really have missed Chris Koth. Then I became when National moved to Kent State, I became the production manager of the other stages, all the stages except for the main stage. And I had to have a go-kart, and I was running for 3 different stages, making sure everything was in order, because I was also the stage manager on the day stage, on the secondary stage that we had. So it was quite a running festival. And people have asked me how I maintain working so hard at those festivals. I was like Casey said, I was high the whole time, just on the women energy, on the music, on being involved and being part of how things happen. It's just really hard to explain about how that was. And then I became the producer of the National in 2009 when it moved to Madison. And so I started out as a gopher, and then now I'm the producer of the festival. You just got to hang in there and stay there and show up.
Yeah, that's right.
You just got, I think that's what I did the best. I showed up and did my job and
Yeah.
didn't question it. I just figured out what needed. I really love to solve problems. And so as a stage manager and producer of the festival, that's what it was about. And it was always, I really loved doing that. And I think I'm good at it.
Yeah, you are. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I joined the board of National in 2011, and I was the president of the board until 2020. I decided to step back, and since I retired from my other, the radio show and production company in Kansas City, I thought I needed to step back from that a little bit and let other people do it. And I think it's been a really good thing because Terry Womyn comes at it as who's the president of the board now, and she comes at it from a different direction, and I think it's really good. She helps me see things that I didn't see, and I've been training her, and it's been working out. But I have to say, I wouldn't have this job if it hadn't been for Retts inviting me to the 1996 National Women's Music Festival.
I think that Retts
That's
is the boss of all your friends. I mean, you're just the boss of all your friends, Rhett. I'm just saying.
I know. I did.
Really?
Well, Linda did a great, I mean, I hired Linda and there was a great decision on my part.
Yeah.
Well, we're still
and
working
Linda,
together. Now she's my boss, so.
and Linda, I hope you'll put information about the June 30th through July 4th, 45th National Women's Music Festival, which is coming up very shortly. Please put it in the chat box so that we can, let everybody know that
it's
that's
virtual, and it's.
that's
I
right.
think I've been watching the videos as they come in, and it's going to be a really great. People have done an extraordinary job of creating their videos and for the festival, and it's really going to be a fun, great festival. And I've learned a lot. I thought it was going to be really easy doing the virtual festival. You just put it up on the screen and it goes out there, and there's nothing else for you to do. Well, that's not true. There's a lot more to do that.
That's
so
right. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Linda. And a quick shout out to Maria Cora, one of my favorite singers out there in the world.
Yes, that's right.
That's right.
So,
and can I say one more thing? I just want to tell something. At our 40th, after our 39th festival, some board members wanted to make the 40th a big blowout festival and have it be our last festival. And I said, National Women's Music Festival is not going to end until it's over my cold dead body. So that's why it's still going on, and those people aren't on the board anymore.
Yeah, they are. Out of here. Thank you, Linda. Thank you. We're going to kind of move along. I see that we are way over some original flow. Retts, are we going to be okay if we just keep moving along? We got a couple of other panelists that I'm just dying to hear from. Everything cool?
We got to hear from everyone, and then
we're checking
we'll
in.
go right into it.
All right.
Margie, we're here until people leave.
Oh, great. Okay, so we're gonna hold on into this space. This is my recollection. The plane was late. I got to the sound check and it was, everything was late. And I walked into the theater, and as is my way, I walked to the edge of the stage and looked out into the hall to see who was at the soundboard. This is always an issue, who's going to be doing my sound tonight? And there was Boden waving and smiling at me. And I thought, I am going to be okay. This woman knows how to create a soundscape that will hold my music and the audience's breathing and the audience's sighs. I'll be able to hear it all, and they'll be able to hear it all. Here is Boden Sandstrom, an incredible sound engineer, beloved friend and sister.
Thank you, Margie. I'm being Can you all hear me? Yeah. Being a shy sound engineer, I'm going to also read what I want to present today. And thank you all for having me.
Boden.
Women's music.
Boden.
Yes? Oh,
Love you.
Me from living as a second-class citizen to a fully productive human being. I went from my first career as a librarian, though I liked it, just bored and missing music. I used to play the French horn, to becoming a sound engineer and starting the sound company Womyn Sound with Cassie Culver, co-producing Radical Harmonies, a documentary on the Women's Music Network with my best friend, Dee Mossbacker, becoming a lecturer in ethnomusicology at the University of Maryland, to archiving our history for the Women's Rights Collection at Smith College. Some of the unexpected highlights along the way were going on the road with Lily Tomlin and being the first female sound engineer at the RFK football soccer stadium in Washington, D.C. Women's music dramatically changed my personal and spiritual life. Being a sound engineer fulfilled my both musically and intellectually. None of this could have been accomplished without the synergy of women-owned businesses, music festivals that developed during that period. In 1974, I met my partner and spouse, Cassie Culver. Cassie passed in 2019. I moved to DC from Boston, where I had joined Boston Female Liberation and became a political activist. I started to understand the roots of oppression of females and that collectively we could fight back. In searching for other feminists in the DC area, I discovered women's music. One of the first concerts I attended grabbed me. It was the farewell concert for the Olivia Collective in 1974, who were moving to California to start Olivia Records. It was at this concert that I first heard Cassie sing. I was moved deeply by the ways her songs combine lesbian sexuality with spirituality, particularly in her song, Sacred River. Judy DeLugash, a member of the collective, was mixing on stage. I went up after the show and asked her how I could do this. She suggested I track down Cassie, who was looking for someone to run her little PA. In the meantime, to learn technical skills, I became a DJ for Sophie's Parlor, one of the first women's music radio shows and now the longest running. It was there that I met Lee Garlington, who later became one of the lead sound engineers in Womyn Sound. I finally connected with Cassie at a lesbian New Year's Eve party, of all places, and I started mixing at Women's Music Concert Series produced by her partner, Mary Spotswood Pugh, at Club Madame in Southeast Washington. And this is where I first met Alex and Maxine Feldman and many of the artists that I got to know and love throughout all the years. People who attended these concerts started asking me to do sound at other events. Because of the interest, Cassie and I decided to start a sound company in 1975, which we named Womyn Sound. From the beginning, our priority was to create inexpensive sound that was clear, evenly distributed, and mixed musically. For the first time in my life, I felt that I was in charge. Our brainstorm was not created in a vacuum. There were many developing lesbian-owned businesses, mostly founded by lesbians, which created a thriving women's music network that supported the concerts. DC was a microcosm of what was happening around the country. It was truly amazing. One of the most supportive relationships was with Amy Horowitz, who we've heard from and became a close friend, and Roadwork. We did sound for the multitude of concerts they produced in the annual festival Sisterfar. One of the highlights was going on the road with Chris Williamson and the Flying Colors Tour. Roadwork co-sponsored Womyn Sound's 10th anniversary with the performer Linda Tillery at the Kilimanjaro Club in DC. We also worked with Sweet Honey and the Rock in the early years. I can still hear their voices in my soul and the words that inspired so many to keep on fighting. Doing their sound introduced us to many political activists and organizations. A synergy developed between women's music businesses and the gay and left political communities. Womyn Sound expanded the business to include technical production, which means being responsible for everything from delay towers for sound, uplinks for satellite feeds, and to porta potties and dumpsters. We did technical production for all the major LGBTQ rallies and the Now rallies. The women's music festivals were where many of us honed our skills. Going from mixing small concerts to the big stages at the festivals made us grow. It was also where we could share how-tos with our peers. I showed up at the first National Women's Music Festival in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois in 1974 and asked Kristen Lems if I could please mix. And she let me because nobody knew me then. And that's where I met Margot, who became my best friend years and years and years later. And Lisa had something to do with that, putting us together at a monitor mix board at Michigan. And so National Women's Music Festival hired Womyn Sound for years to come and bring the sound equipment and do sound. Lisa Vogel was fantastic. She asked me to, are you crying? Because you're gonna make me cry. She asked me to mix at the first Michigan, but I could not because I was working on Cassie's Three Gypsy album in Stonehill, Maine. I had quit my job as a librarian to work on her album. However, Lisa did invite me for the next year and the many years after. She was also very supportive about us filming Radical Harmonies at Mich, and also when I was working on my dissertation, she was very supportive too. Robin Tyler hired Womyn Sound for the Southern Women's Music and Comedy Festival and me for her West Coast festivals. Learning the skills to be a sound engineer was not easy. Most of the male-run sound companies in the DC area would not give us the time of day, even if we offered to volunteer. They did not want to share the knowledge. As a consequence, one of my priorities was to train other women. I started sound engineering classes for women, which immediately caught on. Some of the women started working with me in Womyn Sound and went on to become amazing sound engineers. Beth Berkeley, Marion Colbeck, Chris Coates, Moira Shea, and Sherry Thomas. I especially want to remember Marion and Chris, who recently passed, way too young. I also made it a priority to bring in women engineers to mix at the big rallies on the mall. Leslie Ann Jones, Margaret McFedries from California, and Myrna Johnston Sound Company from Boston. I'm just about wrapping this up now. I ended Womyn Sound in 1988, but continued to do technical production. My last big event was Now's March to Save Women's Lives in 2004. While mixing, I worked with many culturally diverse communities. I pursued a PhD in ethnomusicology at the University of Maryland, so I could learn more and teach what I knew. I wrote my dissertation on the significance of the opening and closing ceremonies at Michigan. I wanted to share with students what I learned about the power of music in political struggles. In conjunction with the Performance Arts Center, my students got the opportunity to attend performances. The musicians would visit our class. Many of the performers were ones that I had worked with during my career as a sound engineer, such as Eastside Barnwell of Sweet Honey, Laurie Anderson, Inti Amani, and Holly Near. They inspired the students to think about how one can make a difference through music and collective activity. The circle is never ending.
Thank you, Boden. Thank you so much. I believe how the story is that I was on one line and Boo was on the other line, and this 19-year-old woman called as part of the We Want the Music collective from Michigan saying, we want to do a festival outdoors in the countryside of Michigan. And we want to bring Margie and we want to bring, and she named some other singer-songwriters. And I was listening and I said, what about Kay Gardner? She does classical music. Kay Gardner. What about Kay Gardner? And my recollection, of course, like billions of years later, is that Lisa said, oh yeah, great. Yeah, Kay Gardner. And then I mentioned a couple of other names and she said, oh yeah, that's great. That's great. And I just want to say that the history and legacy of the Michigan Women's Music Festival is this curiosity, this open-mindedness, this willingness to take on board new musicians, new sounds, new capacities, new ideas for this land that it might share lesbian, feminist, culture, politics, the whole ball of wax, the world of Lesbiana. Lisa Vogel.
Wow. Oh, I really liked what Linda said. I just showed up and did what was asked of me. You know, that's what I did. That's what I tried to do, Linda. I had sometimes like 8,000 people asking it, but that's what we all did, right? And I really like that you just named that, just showed up and did the next right thing. I mean, it was really fascinating listening to everybody. Thank you all so much. You know, I've done other things in production. I just got done working on a record with Barbara Higbee and Vicki Randall. You know, I'm doing other things, dabbling here and there. And I've carried so many congas because I worked with so many Latin bands when I lived in New York. I get a black belt in conga carrying. And I've road managed and things like that, but I mostly produced this music festival. Mm-hmm. And the Michigan Women's Music Festival.
Okay.
And and that is a music festival and an arts festival, and eventually had 4 stages. And so I learned a lot about all aspects of production. I learned a lot about artists. I loved, one of my favorite things to do in the course of my year was to program the festival and work on the flow for each stage, and then note where I fucked up, or, oh, that actually was weird, but it worked. And I loved learning about, I loved backline and moving like the keyboards from stage to stage, so I didn't have to pay more money. And I learned a lot from so many women. So I cut my teeth on Lenny Schwendinger, and until, you know, the music got in the way for Lenny, right? She had to go on and do tunnels and big buildings, and oh my God, did I learn about lighting at a time when we really didn't know that much about lighting. You know, besides the fact that she would also scamper up the scaffolding and cover the lights with tarps with me. But I learned so much from Margot and Boden in those early years, so much. And then for many, many years, I've had the amazing privilege of working with Casey, Connie Lane, and Myrna Johnson, as well as, I mean, I could name a lot of people, and but we had an incredible team. I do want to say, in the spirit of shout out, I want to shout out to my sister, who is one of the co-founders of the festival, Christy Vogel. You know, who was so critical in all things. Sandy Ramsey is here someplace. Oh, I'm looking right at you. Sandy is my longest single relationship. Mwah. She worked on the festival for 30 some years. Sorry, I can't remember. Through thick and thin, and man, did we go thick and thin. Sandy Ramsey was solid as a rock. She did so many other things in women's music. We were just a snack at midway in her career. And then Terry Lynn Delk is up in the house, and Terry Lynn and Sandy and I were the last full-time crew of the festival. And Terry Lynn now works with Olivia Records Olivia touring, whatever, doing production. And I love you, Sister Terry Lynn. So those are my shout outs. But so I really love production, so many parts of it, and I honor what everybody here has said about their parts. And we used to say that the music was an excuse to do this experimental thing that we were really doing, which was building a women's town and exploring what our value system was about where were our priorities? Who would we make room for? Who would we make ourselves uncomfortable to make room for? You know, like where was our willingness to learn about all the things we didn't know about as white working class women from Michigan, right? Because we were doing this thing and we were afforded an opportunity to learn, because women came, we were right at the right place at the right time. Women came, 2,000 women came to the first festival. And we were like small town, not sophisticated, and there you all were. And our learning curve was like straight up. So, and the one thing I feel like Michigan did, the whole community of Michigan did, like something that God has provided this well of willingness. And we really wanted to learn together how to create a new world. So like a radical lesbian feminist world. And out of that, we all wanted to do our very best for each other because we loved each other. And so we wanted to learn, how do we make this massive property accessible to the women who are coming in wheelchairs, to the woman, the first woman? Oh my God, she's going to be fucked coming in a wheelchair. What are we going to do? And so on and so forth, like every little detail. And we're here talking about the technical details, which I feel like Michigan excelled at. I was always so proud. And, you know, the skill in which the stages were built, the little bubbler of water that you got to sit and have a drink, you know, all women plumbers, and all of the herbal teas that you could, you know, all of that from the staff, but also the women who came. Our priority was to include everyone who came in the creation of the event, because we really were wanting to not have a consumer event. Now, women's music was very much not a typical consumer event. And Retts, give me a shout when I have to wrap up, please.
I will.
Women's music in itself was not a consumer event, but Michigan went to the far left of that, I'd like to think. And we really needed women to do that. So and that happened. And so the ownership with everyone who came actually grew. And because of that ownership, we could push each other and encourage each other to want to learn about issues that might scare us in other environments, you know, how to have conversations across different abilities, how to have cross-class conversations, how to actually deal with racism that happens on the spot, and then use that to learn more about how we can live in a multiracial, multicultural community and not be afraid of one another. Not just like live parallel, but how do we live together?
Two more minutes, please.
Thank you. So I feel like what my work was to try to support and help hold into really very many, very capable hands, a petri dish of how we had a space, you know, like a number of people here talked about, you know, they did this and they did this and they did this, and then they came to Michigan and we did it together. And that's what Michigan became. That wasn't my idea. You know, I was one of the people that also came to that space, and I got to experience that. My honor was to be the person to hold its shape and to support all of the great ideas that other women came with. Now, I had a few good ideas myself, but I really feel like my particular technical skill was recognizing good ideas and getting behind those good ideas and not being scared to say no also, right? So I wasn't just like the town bottom. I actually was like, that's a great idea, you know, and I wasn't a yes person, but so many brilliant women, their technical skills, their artistic skills, their creative skills, their political fierceness kind of came into one space, and I never lost sight that I was like the guardian of that, not the creator of that. I helped hold the space so that that could happen. So is that a technical skill? Is that a production skill? Maybe, but that's, I don't know. That's what I feel like I did. And then I carried a lot of congas, you know?
Okay, one more minute, Lisa.
Okay, well, I think that's, I know we're running short on time. Oh, Terry Updergrove got mentioned, and Mary Spotswood Pugh got mentioned. And thank you for mentioning those women. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm shocked that I came in under 5, but
Thank you, Lisa. Boy, you know, we have a lot of questions, and there were questions that came in from registrants as well. So I'd like to say, let's everybody stand up and do the hokey pokey for a little while, but we're going to go straight on. So do it in your chair. Okay.
Yeah.
And here's one question, Mel, and I'm very interested for you to share, because we've had a conversation about this, but also others as well. What about where we are now in women's music and young women getting involved in music driven by women's energy right now? What's out there, Mel? And I want to get others as well. What's out there?
Okay, that must be my ride. Well, one of the things that I do a lot of working with a lot of young artists, particularly a lot of young artists of color. So a lot of my work with younger musicians has been with the Black Lives Matter movement and writing new songs for change. And so that is one of the things that's been happening for me, and I'm actually being part of a children's album of songs for change for Black kids.
Oh.
So I am the elder person working with like hip hop artists and all this other stuff.
Oh.
And so that's happening, and that's one of the things that's really, really important. And I've also been mentoring young singer-songwriter, young sisters who that I'm really, really happy to do that. And one quick thing, the last time I was at National, we main stage performers like sponsored a younger person who did the same kind of thing as we did, and gave them a showcase. And I think that that's really, really important. And it was funny because this young sister said, I didn't know this kind of stuff was going on. How long has this festival thing been going on? And for them to, they were like, this is incredible. So there is still a huge need for what it is that we do. I mean, you know, I mean, we've made history, and now we got to continue to make more.
That's right. That's right. Thanks, Scoot. Anyone else want to comment? Just lift your hand so I can call on you. In our panel about the young ones, this next generation. I know you're doing something there at the festival, Linda. Tell me about it.
You got to unmute, baby.
Yeah, unmute yourself.
Panel members should unmute so they can just jump right in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when I book the artists, I always try to book a fair amount of younger women and older women, because I've done it at the shows in Kansas City, and then come to find out the younger women do like the older women, and the older women do like the younger women's music. And it's a way for, I mean, so many young women come, and they are just astounded that there's this thing going on that they love, and they want to get involved, and they keep coming back. And that's for women's music festivals to continue. We have to get the young women,
that's right,
involved, and maybe it'd be the 4th wave, because I feel like I'm the 3rd wave.
Thank you, Linda. I'm gonna move around. What about you, Amy? Yeah, Amy.
I was just going to say the big shock and wake up call for me was in 2018 when Toshi took on the incredible blessing curation of the Sister Fire reunion. And she said, I'm going to do this, not by committee, you know, and there's going to be a lot of younger women there. And so on that stage at the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, Tatiana Akil, then unknown Yasmin Williams, not from Sweet Honey, the guitar player, Just to name a few, some poets, Roya Marsh. It was for them to stand on a Sister Fire stage that had a breadth of decades, and to have Alexis DeVoe emceeing, and to feel themselves a part of this history changed, it changed all the old folk that were there. It was like, oh, okay. That's why I said when the reins are in the hands of the young who dare to run against the storm, we don't know where they're taking us.
Yeah.
And what we have to offer is to just stay present as long as we have breath in our body, to quote Bernice again. So I mean, it was a real wake-up call. And there's so much going on out there. So much going on out there. And we have to be able to recognize it.
Yes. Thank you, Amy. Where we are now, someone asked me the other day, are you retired? And I said, no way. I am untired. Come on, I am not done yet. And I'm looking at the women in this room and listening to the energy and feeling the energy. And I'm thinking, well, anyone want to tell us what they're doing today? And I'm going to start with KC, because I know that she did something today that is about being in the present as a result of everything that she's learned in women's,
Yes.
etc. up till today. Come on, Casey, tell us.
Well, I just applied for a teaching position at UC Berkeley to teach their lighting design courses, and my interview was actually this morning at 9 a.m.
Thank you, Casey.
So.
Beautiful. Anyone else doing something right now that they want everyone else to know? Some project. Yeah, Retts. I'm going to call you.
I'm doing these OLOC Zooms with Mev in the group, and it's really, really, bringing women together in OLOC and old lesbians, and the pandemic was bad, but this is really what came out of it, and we're going to be doing a lot more Zooms. So
that's great. And how can we find out that information for people who may not be OLOC members right now, but just showed up today?
You can go on the website, and in the chat, we put it in the chat, and at the end, I'll announce the next one. And we're going to be doing one June 24th. It's just part 2 of this, and it's going to be the distribution. The women who distributed all these, all the music and everything.
And let me just add to that, Margie, real quick, to say everybody who's registered and showed up at today's Zoom, I know who you are, and you will be put on the OLOC mailing list for a few months, just to kind of get a sense of what we're doing. So you'll get those informations as well.
That's great.
Don't mess with
I have one more in the now thing. Roadwork is sponsoring a project called the Heartbeat Music Project that is founded by my daughter, who's a 24-year-old violinist. It provides,
might I say, a brilliant violinist.
And her name is?
Ariel Horowitz.
I mean, come on.
All right. Thank you, Amy.
She, so if you want to learn more about the Heartbeat Music Project, it provides music lessons for K through 12 Navajo Nation kids, and is still going. The executive director is a Navajo sister and is an artistic director, and that's in the now.
Beautiful. Thank you, Amy. Anyone else want to announce a project they're on right now? Yeah, Linda.
Well, Leslie Judd would be mad at me if I didn't mention the National Women's Music Festival Orchestra with Nan Washburn from Minneapolis. We've been producing the orchestra for 6 or 7 years now, and it's really added. I mean, having a full orchestra on the stage at National is amazing, and they're doing it virtually this year, so it's going to be an ensemble, but it's going to be really beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm working on
we're keeping those composers. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's great. Thank you, Linda. Did I see you, Boden?
Yeah, I'm working on archives. I sent 45 boxes of Woman Sound archives to Smith. It took me 2 years to do that, and I recorded every single job we ever did, every person we ever worked with, every hall we were ever in, all the dates, and hope to put it into a book someday. And now I just sent off 52 boxes of Cassie Culver's archives. And I'm still working on that. And the reason I'm bringing it up is I really encourage everyone to think about archiving anything that you have your hands on, and doing it as you go along now, because it's incredibly time consuming, but incredibly important.
I'd like to give a quick shout out
I just,
to Len Keller, who was an extraordinary archivist here in the Bay Area who passed away. And she helped start the Lesbian of Color Archives
Oh, that's great.
right here. And she just passed away in the last couple of months. So thanks for doing that, Boden. It's important.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Mel.
I want
I
to give
think-
a shout out to Bonnie Morris, because I know she does a lot of archiving. If
Oh,
you
yeah.
need any with archiving, contact Bonnie. She's on the Zoom with us.
Yes.
Hey,
she
Bon
is.
Bon.
All right, Bonnie. All right, Dr. Bon.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're coming to the end. And Scoot, I want to turn it over to you to say what you want to say before we wrap up. Beloved friend.
Sam, I could not be who I am and where I am without you. And as a musician, as an artist, I need, in order to be me, I need Amy and Connie and KC and Laura and Tam and Linda and Boden and Lisa and Mev and Retts. We could not be who we are in some way without you. So thank you very, 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 very much for sharing your time with us today. And thank you, fam, out there, because we wouldn't be nothing without y'all.
That is for real. Right. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank
Melanie
you.
DeMore. Melanie DeMore. I have been asked by OLOC to invite those who can to go to a link that's going to drop into the chat box and to make a contribution to Old Lesbians Organizing for Change in the name of Alex Dobkin, right now or soon. We're gathering funds for the ongoing work of OLOC, Old Lesbians Organizing for Change, in the name of the warrior, the voice, the
Head lesbian.
demonstrated, lived out commitment of Alex Dobkin and every one of us who believes so strongly in the work that she did and continues to do through us. And so it's right there, OLOC GoFundMe link. There it is in the chat box. Okay.